The day Melissa Carter's SUV sank into my front lawn, it didn't just crack the ground, it cracked the whole neighborhood open. Because 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email from the Homeowners Association, calling an emergency hearing against me. And I realized, standing there with wet grass stuck to my shoes, that the woman screaming at me from the curb was the same woman who helped run the place. I'm Ethan Miller, and I live in a quiet little subdivision called Maple Ridge Estates in Cedar Falls. You know, the kind trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, everybody waves like they're auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. I work from home, I keep to myself, and I take weird pride in a clean yard. Not in a perfect is my personality way. More like it's the one part of life I can control. Melissa moved in across the street like a storm rolling over a flat field. Mid-40s hair, always tight sunglasses, even when the sun's barely out, and a voice that somehow sounded like a complaint before she even finished the sentence. Her SUV was this shiny, oversized thing that looked like it cost more than my first car and my student loans combined. And for some reason, she decided the best place to park it wasn't her driveway. It was my grass. The first time, I thought it was a mistake. 2 tires climbed over the curb and settled into my lawn like it belonged there, like my yard was just overflow parking. I walked out, kept it friendly, and said, "Hey, could you not park on the grass? It tears it up." She didn't even look embarrassed. She smirked and went, "It's just grass." The next day, same thing. And the day after that, she started pulling up farther, like she was testing how much she could get away with. So I put up a little sign near the edge of my lawn. Nothing dramatic. Just, "Please don't park on the grass." Melissa read it, laughed, and with this casual little flick of her hand, knocked it over. Then she looked straight at me and said, "Are you going to cry over a few blades, sweetie?" That's when I learned something about her. She didn't just ignore boundaries. She enjoyed stepping on them. I figured, fine, this is exactly why the Homeowners Association exists, right? I emailed the HOA with photos, dates, and a calm explanation: tires on the lawn. Damage repeated requests. They replied with one of those sterile copy-paste lines, "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will look into it." Then, nothing. No follow-up, no warning tour, no "we spoke to the homeowner," just silence. 3 days later, I got a violation notice in my mailbox, not for her parking for my lawn looking uneven and damaged. I stood in my driveway rereading it like I'd misread English overnight. It was my grass she was destroying, and I was getting fined for it. When I emailed back asking how that made any sense, the response came faster this time. Maintain your property to community standards or additional penalties may apply. That same afternoon, Melissa strolled by while I was kneeling with sod patches. She didn't offer help, didn't even pretend to feel bad. She just said loud enough for me to hear through the hedge, "Rules are rules, Ethan." And it clicked. This wasn't an annoying neighbor. This was a power move. I asked around and learned why the HOA suddenly had selective vision. Melissa wasn't just some random homeowner. She sat on a committee and she was tight with the board president. From that point on, the harassment got organized. Not yelling from the street harassment, the kind that comes on letterhead. I got dinged for my trash cans being visible too long on pickup day, even though they were inside my fence. I got warned about unauthorized lawn signage, the sign she'd knocked over and I'd already removed. And every time I tried to talk like an adult, I got the same cold answer. "We'll note your concern." It was like arguing with a printer. Meanwhile, Melissa kept driving onto my grass, carving deeper ruts, compacting the soil, turning the edge of my yard into a muddy trench. Sometimes she'd rev just a little before pulling away like she wanted the dirt to spray. I'm not proud of it, but there was a week where I stopped going out when I heard her engine. I'd be at my desk headset on trying to focus, and that sound would hit that low idle and my stomach would tighten. One night I opened my mailbox and found another notice, plus a hearing reminder for ongoing property non-compliance. I sat on my couch with the papers in my lap staring at my own name like I'd done something criminal. And for a minute I thought maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I should pay the stupid fine, reseed the lawn again, stop poking the bear, because clearly the bear had a board seat. Then I caught myself not feeling guilty, just feeling tired, and that was the part that scared me, because if I was already exhausted, what was this going to look like in 6 months? So I stopped trying to win on emotions. I started trying to win on paper. I pulled out the actual HOA rules, the bylaws, the design guidelines, all that boring stuff nobody reads until they're trapped in it. I went line by line like it was a contract dispute, because it basically was. That's when I found a section I'd never heard anyone talk about, a green sustainability incentive program. Basically, the community allowed eco-friendly yard modifications for stormwater control as long as they weren't permanent structures. And I had an idea that felt petty, but also perfectly legal. If she wanted to treat my yard like her driveway, I'd make that choice cost her. I submitted an application to convert the damaged strip of lawn into a shallow bioswale, a landscaped rain channel designed to absorb runoff. It's not a moat, it's not a trap. It's something cities literally encourage. I included a diagram, photos, a short explanation, and the kind of language people in committees love: drainage improvement, erosion reduction, stormwater management. 2 days later, it got approved. I knew Melissa would try to twist it, so I added a small sign at the edge: clean, simple, wetland area, no vehicles. Then I planted native grasses that looked normal, until they weren't. A week later, the forecast called for heavy rain, and like clockwork, Melissa rolled up, climbed the curb, and parked half her SUV on my lawn. I watched from my front window while the rain started to fall. Not in a cartoon villain way, more like I couldn't look away. The soil was already soft. The bioswale was doing what it was designed to do, and her tires were sitting right where the ground was meant to absorb water. Then she stepped out, checked her phone, and walked inside like she'd just dropped off a pizza. 30 minutes later, she came back out, hopped in, and hit the gas. The front tires spun once, twice, and then the whole SU5 dipped with a wet, ugly sound. It didn't flip. It didn't explode. It just sank, slow, heavy, humiliating, until the undercarriage kissed mud and the wheels clawed air. Melissa slammed the door open and started yelling like the yard had personally attacked her. "This is unbelievable, Ethan. What did you do?" I walked out with my hands visible, calm on purpose, and pointed at the sign. "Melissa. It's literally marked. No vehicles." She stepped closer, eyes wide, voice sharp enough to cut drywall. "You made this so my car would sink. That's criminal. I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling my lawyer. Call whoever you want," I said, still not raising my voice. "Just don't step onto my property." That last line set her off like a match. She took one step onto the grass anyway, like she couldn't help it, and jabbed a finger at my chest. "Your little swamp is a hazard," she snapped. "I'm on the board. You're done." She wasn't bluffing. Within an hour, my email lit up emergency hearing regarding an unapproved safety hazard and community endangerment. Except it wasn't unapproved, and she knew it. While Melissa was on the phone raging, I was inside pulling up every receipt, every email, every approval document. I exported the entire message thread showing the HOA committee stamp and the date. Then I checked my security camera footage, and my jaw tightened. Because that night around 11:40 p.m., Melissa walked across the street in a hoodie carrying a bag. She crouched by the edge of my bioswale and dumped gravel into it, not enough to fix it, just enough to mess it up. Then she looked around like she was in a spy movie and hurried back home. The next morning, my neighbor Tom Bennett knocked on my door. He's this older guy who always keeps it polite, always keeps it quiet. He leaned in and said, "I saw her out there last night." Then he added, like he'd been holding it in for years, "She's been pulling this kind of stuff with people. I'm sick of it." Even the tow truck driver, Jake, shook his head when he arrived to pull her SUV out. He glanced at the sign, glanced at the ruts, and muttered, "Lady drove onto a wetland and wants to blame the weather." The hearing was 2 days later in the community clubhouse, fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a long table where the board sat like judges. Melissa was already there, arms crossed, lips tight, tapping a pen like she was keeping time for my execution. I walked in with a folder so thick it made a sound when I set it down. The board president started talking about hazards and negligence, and Melissa kept shaking her head like I was the problem child in a grocery store. Then I spoke, not angry, controlled. I submitted the bioswale application I said. It was approved. Here's the approval email. Here's the stamped form. Here are the guidelines that authorize it. I slid copies across the table. Melissa's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. Then I put my laptop on the table and played the footage. First, the clips of her SUV driving onto my grass over and over, ignoring my requests, ignoring the sign. Then the clip of her knocking over my "Please don't park" sign, laughing. Then the midnight clip, her dumping gravel into my yard like she was erasing evidence. The room went quiet in that way that feels heavy in your ears. Melissa tried to jump in, voice climbing, "He's manipulating the footage." Linda Parker, one of the board members, cut her off. "Melissa," she said flat and sharp, "you're on a committee. This is a conflict of interest and you're using your position to retaliate." Melissa snapped her head toward Linda like she couldn't believe anyone dared. "You don't know what you're talking about." Linda didn't blink. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And the city inspector is already involved because of the trespass and tampering." That part wasn't a threat, it was a fact. I'd filed a report, I'd sent the footage, and the inspector had documented the interference on a permitted drainage feature. Melissa's posture shifted just slightly, like the ground under her finally moved the way my lawn had. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and nothing clean came out. The board voted right there. Melissa was removed from her committee role effective immediately, and the violation notices against me were rescinded on the spot. The president tried to wrap it up fast, like he wanted the whole thing to disappear, but the damage was already done. Melissa stood up so hard her chair scraped, face flushed, eyes bright with anger, and for the first time since she moved in, she didn't have the room. I gathered my folder, zipped it closed, and looked at her for 1 second. Not smug, just finished. "Rules are rules," I said quietly, and walked out before she could find a way to twist it. Lesson power trips don't survive paperwork and proof.